Wall Street banks are getting bored with scamming individual consumers, so in recent years they've moved on to ripping off entire cities. Through a complex series of predatory lending and investing, the big banks have sent cities into bankruptcy while they get to pocket millions of dollars in profits. Joining me now to explain what's happening is Michael Burg. Michael, I think the entire public is well aware at this point of how Wall Street has just been ripping off mom and pop investors, individual consumers. We've talked about that countless times here, but there are bigger scams. Wall Street got tired of just saying, I'm going to get mom and pop, I'm going to get this guy, I'm going to get that guy. They wanted bigger fish. They are now going after, and have been for several years, entire cities, municipalities all over the country with all these scams. Tell us what's happening with this latest Wall Street target here.
Well, the municipalities and states have been targeted for many years. We saw in 2008, $3.7 trillion was actually lost approximately from states and municipalities with the default credit swaps with regard to the CDOs. And so it's been going on for a while. One of the new ones, or one of the ones that's been around, is these variable, the VRDBs, which are the variable rate demand bonds, which is an interesting new idea for Wall Street to try to get people to go and invest in these for their infrastructure. And basically, many times you have municipalities or states will have bond issues which will run, and those would be long-term, and the interest rate would be basically the same. So what they did is they came up with this new idea with these variable rate demand bonds, in which you could go ahead and the municipality could do it and set them out there, but then the investors would then have the right to terminate it every year depending on what happens with the interest rates. And when they would terminate them and get their money back, that would leave the municipalities, the cupboard would be bare, they would be unable to do the projects, and now they'd have to come up with another way to try to finance it. And it was that new way of financing it that it has been disastrous for many municipalities.
So is this any different from the scams that they've been pulling on typical investors, or is this something that's just new, designed for municipalities?
Well, it is something new, and it is designed for municipalities, but there are similar kind of things that they've done. I'll give you an example. We represent developers who would pay both LIBOR or interest rates. They'd pay a monthly fee to maintain their rate. But what we found out in the LIBOR deal, and everybody out there, I'm sure if you've read the financial papers, know that there were scams going on with manipulation of the LIBOR rates or the interest rates. So what would happen is they would basically manipulate the rate. In the meantime, individuals, or in this case, maybe municipalities or states, may actually have been paying every month to maintain a rate that was actually not the correct rate. In fact, they may have even had a better rate had there not been the manipulation. So there's lots of things going on that are offshoots of this securitized product problem that caused the $7 trillion crash in the world economy in 2008. So they're different, but it's still the same mindset of Wall Street that is creating them. One of the problems is the people who are making the financial decisions do not have the background or the education. Many times it's the treasurer, if it's a state. If it's a municipality, it may be somebody who's the auditor, who then has to rely on some sort of a manager to look at these. These are very complex transactions. And so what happens is there's a twofold problem. Number one, the people who are getting into these scams don't know or understand the details and the risks involved in these scams. That's number one. Number two is, for example, when we went around and we talked to 15 or 20 states, I can tell you that many of the states, they did not want anybody to know that they got involved in these scams. And so the first meeting we'd have, it would be the auditor, or it would be for a municipality, or it would be the treasurer saying, well, we never bought any of those. We weren't involved in this scam. and then maybe the governor or the attorney general would let us look at it, and we would look at it and we'd say, no, in fact, you lost hundreds of millions of dollars as a result of that. And that's when the treasurer or the governor, and many times, would say, well, we don't want to do anything about it. We don't want to raise it because we don't want the public, and many of these people are elected. So they got the governors elected, you've got in many states, the treasurer's elected, and that treasurer is a politician. He's not somebody who is knowledgeable about investments. So they're relying on Wall Street. So the problem is really, significant in terms of the taxpayers' money has been lost, and now the state is unable to do anything about it because they don't want the world knowing that they've lost all this money of the taxpayers.
So it really kind of leaves you with what do we do? And I guess that's, the question here is, what's the ultimate remedy?
Here's some ideas, and some of them came from the New York Times, who we know, Gretchen Morgenthaler, who actually we've talked to and been quoted in the New York Times and in Wall Street Journal, and other people have talked about it. There's really 3 things we can do about it. Number 1, we need to put the people who are doing the scams in jail. We've talked about it over and over and over again, and unless there is a jail, that is going to be the deterrence. And not jail for the guy down the ladder who's just following orders. That's what we see. Any prosecutions that have been done by the Obama administration have been really the lower level guys. We have to go right to the heart of the problem, which is the people who are running these major banks in Wall Street, and say, guess what? You're going to be held responsible. Look at the VW situation right now. The chairman of the board is the one who's on the hot seat. He said, I didn't know any of this was going on. But when it comes to Wall Street in the United States, those people are untouchable. Yeah. The Jamie Dimons, the chairman of the board, we have to go and get them and make them responsible for what happens. That's number 1. Number 2, there's an interesting idea, which is having what's referred to as bounty hunters. And I guess I would be proud to be a bounty hunter because, quite frankly, I am one, as is Mike Papantonio's firm and others, which is we get hired by the Attorney General. There is no cost, out-of-pocket cost, because we work on contingencies. So in essence, the government, the municipalities can hire a list of law firms who are knowledgeable in this area to go after these people to get their money back. We've been before many attorney generals, many of which have hired us, many of which don't want to get involved. And they don't want to get involved for numerous reasons. And so it seems to me those are at least 2 things. And the third one is to have legislation which prohibits certain kinds of securitized products from being sold. When we look at the CDO and some of these default swap, some of the things that have been going on, clearly we need to say, you can't do that. You can't clone these things and not have real security behind it. We also need to separate these, break up. You know what? We have anti-monopoly laws, but here they don't apply to these giant banks. They're insurance companies. They sell securities. They're investment banks, and they're quote banks that actually take your money, but in terms of savings and loaning money and everything else. But they should be divided up. That's how it was. That's what Glass-Steagall did. And of course, there is a push now to try to get the legislation to have some teeth. Unfortunately, the Republicans and Wall Street, which gives hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to politicians, have avoided that coming into existence. But I think those are the options, Farron.
Well, Michael, unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you for telling us the story. Thank you for everything you do with Free Speech TV. And thank you most of all for being out there holding these banks accountable. You and your entire firm, you do wonderful work. Thank you very much.
Very kind. Thank you very much.